Okay, hello. Everybody's coming in from the waiting room. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Okay, I think everybody is in, guys. Oh, a little more. Okay, let's kick things off. Thank you for joining us. Today is Enhancing Sage Intacct with Factura.ai, a smarter approach to AP automation. A little bit of housekeeping. We have time for Q&A. Please use the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring it throughout the webinar, but we have time reserved at the end to answer all questions. If we don't get to your question, I'll get a log and we'll make sure that either Factura or Tablespoon follows up with you right after the webinar.
Awesome. Kate, thank you so much. My name's Alicia Kleinman. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today. I'm the Director of Partnerships for Factura.ai. So we work super closely with Tablespoon. And I wanted to introduce our panel today. It is Bradley Block. He's the CEO and co-founder of Factura.ai. Andy Lester, who's the founder and CEO of Tablespoon. And then our special guest today is Carrie August, who is the Senior Vice President of Finance and Accounting for Good Times Restaurant Group. And so I'm going to open it up to you guys to jump in. I'll pass the mic over to Bradley and you can get us started. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thanks, Alicia. Carrie, let's start back at the beginning. You were working for an outsourced firm. Good Times was thinking about bringing it in-house. Maybe just walk us through what was going through Good Times' mind, and what vision did they want from moving from an outsourced firm to bringing it in-house?
Oh, okay. So yeah, we were in a space where we're needing more visibility and more control over our accounting processes and our month-end close timelines. So we hadn't quite been able to achieve what we needed to with quality and timeliness of what we needed with our outsource group.
Gotcha. And then so as you bring things in-house, how do you staff around that change?
Well, so we really had a kind of a good idea of what we were going to need for number of people just based on our past experience. So, and we were also anticipating that in the beginning, it would be a stretch for the new team, especially given that we were going live with new systems and the new team just a month before our year end. So, but we also expected that as time went on and processes became more efficient, that we'd be able to gain the efficiency and utilize the team in different ways.
Gotcha. So you had your team kind of grow into the new processes, new systems versus overloading with lots of people just, manually doing processes.
Yeah, we knew it would be a rough couple of months, but then what we expected was things that they were going to level out a little bit and get easier, and they did. So we've had good experience with that.
Gotcha. Perfect.
So Carrie, obviously you ended up just making the decision to implement Sage Intacct as your ERP system. And you mentioned, some of the added challenge of having to stand up systems and, sort of build a team at the same time. So I'm curious, how did you guys make the decision to go with Sage Intacct? What were sort of the main drivers behind that decision?
Well, so we were looking for just we needed a solid cloud-based accounting system that didn't have a lot of complexities. That's what I was looking for. And we needed it to do a few specific things. It needed to be able to handle our multiple entities, multiple locations. It needed to have role-based permissions so that that would allow for proper segregation of duties. And then also we were concerned and looking at its integration abilities with back of house systems, payroll systems, what have you. Approval workflows were important for us as well, for both journal entries and account payable tasks. And then we were also looking for a system that would handle the AP, EDI, the electronic invoicing and imaging for us as well. And so, yeah.
You mentioned that the kind of the timing of all of this transition to coming a month before your year end, and obviously as a public company, year end's pretty
big deal.
pretty big deal. Yeah, pretty tight timeline. So
Sure.
what, how sort of that timing aspect of it, how much of that was a driver in terms of like the implementation process and, ultimately time to go live?
Yeah, so we certainly did not want to time it to be the last month of a quarter or the last month of the year. So we decided to go with the middle month, and gave us kind of a practice run of getting through all of our close processes one time before we had to do it for a quarter end. So yeah, the timing of it was strategic.
Gotcha. And so once you made the decision to go with Intacct as your ERP, how did you evaluate AP Solutions to be a complementary tool on top of Intacct?
So as we were working with Tablespoon, talking about Sage Intacct and its capabilities, Tablespoon was very good at listening to our specific AP needs, which may have been unique in some regards. And so after talking with us, Tablespoon was very honest that Sage Intacct may not have all of the capabilities that we need, and that's when they offered up a couple of different partners that might be options for us. And so yeah, that's how we decided that we were going to be needing to work with an outside AP solution that would connect well with Intacct.
Gotcha. And I do recall during our implementation, you had certain processes that were legacy processes.
Mhm.
And, I gave my recommendation to you saying, oh, I think these are options to improve upon those
Sure.
processes. And you said, Brad, thank you for the recommendation, but this is, we want to keep with our current process. And I think one of the things I recall was that you were just very pleased that we were able to kind of fall into your existing processes, automate those processes in the current flows, but not to change everything, not to be like, I always say it's like, it's not take it or leave it. It's like, we're not the ones dictating that this is how your AP should be. It's more of, this is how your AP is. These are your processes. How do we update and automate those processes, which is probably very similar to, the integration and working with Intacct as well of, you could say, okay, this ERP does it this way, or could it kind of be flexible enough to the way that we work and work around those?
Yeah. So yeah, you're recalling correctly. And I was, like you said, I was appreciative of hearing your point of view. But as you can probably imagine, when you're doing a major accounting transition, you're standing up new systems, you're standing up new teams. There are a lot of moving parts, and I knew going into it that our best chance of success was to change as little as possible in the processes that feed into accounting. And so I wasn't in a position where I was willing to make a lot of changes that would be felt by our operators. And so that's why I wanted to come in. Let's just stand it up and do it the way we're doing it. And not to say that we'll never change, but I knew that was our best chance of success. And you listened very well to that, met us where we were at, and I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. And so, maybe this is hard to answer because you were, using an outsourced firm, but I guess, but prior to moving to Sage Intacct and Factura, was the outsourced firm just doing all of your AP data entry?
Yeah. So both our AP and our accounting was outsourced to the same firm. So yeah, they were handling both of that. So it wasn't like we were doing one piece of it.
Gotcha. And then so, you implement Factura, you implement Sage Intacct, and I guess just from your goal, your vision of what you ultimately wanted, how did those two solutions and tech stacks, how did those meet the needs of what you ultimately wanted to achieve?
Perfectly. Honestly, I mean, the systems work very well together. And given our unique AP needs, as Tablespoon pointed out to us, we really needed another partner, an AP partner, to come in and do some of those workflows for us and handle our EDI and our imaging. And so yeah, I think it was very necessary that we connect Factura with Intacct, and the result has been very good.
Gotcha. And do you have any like measurable metrics that you tracked, maybe prior to the switch with your outsourced firm versus now bringing it in-house and using these two technologies?
Not so much. We weren't so much tracking, metrics with the outsource firm, but I mean, I can tell you now, I utilize and we track the Factura efficiency report every month. We're watching that, and pleased that we have gained efficiency. We've gained like 5.5% efficiency since onboard. So now we're at 95% efficiency. I'd love for that to be even a little bit higher, but we keep gaining on it. So, but that's pretty good that 95% of our invoices don't require any intervention.
That's amazing. That's, from what I see across our customer base, that's definitely best in class for sure. You can never get 100%. I don't think
I mean, but I always want more, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's always nice. Amazing.
So switching gears a little bit, Carrie, now that you've been live on Sage Intacct for a little bit here, what sort of stands out as far as the key benefits? What do you guys really rely on most in the system?
Well, I mean, really all of it. I mean, we're relying on the workflows, we're relying on the dashboards, the reporting. And yeah, everything that we set up, we utilize. So it's all necessary.
And I know that, again, there's differences in technology when we're talking about an outsource firm. Often when any group is working with an outsource firm, the outsource firm is bringing the technology typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't always have control of that as a client. So, were there any sort of big like game changers just from a tech perspective as you made that shift going from, the reporting, the dashboards, basically what you had access to before that you couldn't control to now having that control in a system that you own? Were there any just big difference makers?
Well, I mean, one nice thing has been the dashboards. We didn't have that before. And so that's kind of nice. We've Tablespoon built the first couple of dashboards for us. And then from there, I was able to build out dashboards specific to every role that we have set up, because every role needs, is concerned with and needs to look at different things. So, so yeah, that's something that has been nice. Now, every non-accounting team member that logs into Intacct has their own view and their own links and their own reports and graphs that pop up. And so that has been a very nice feature, and that's appreciated by our operators.
That's great. And then related to that, of course, is you do have two brands, that you operate, and they're somewhat different. You have a QSR concept,
Mm-hmm.
and then full service, and a relatively complex structure, from what I remember in terms of just the way everything has to be managed in terms of reporting. So have you found, how has Sage Intacct been able to provide better visibility for you across those brands? Has that been part of that transformation for you?
I think yes, they're two different brands, but we do our best to operate them as similarly as we can. So, like for instance, they share a chart of accounts, so that is helpful that we're able to have it all in one instance. A lot of the reporting that we set up is able to be utilized for both concepts. So although one of them is a full service and may utilize more accounts, for instance, than the other, the platform it works really well for that.
Right. Oh, Brad, you're on mute.
Yeah, we're muted.
Sorry, apologize. I tell everyone that, I consider Factura to be a customer service business that just happens to sell AP software. I'd love to just, hear from your experience. Have you needed to reach out to Factura's customer support? We'll start with that, and then, vice versa. Have you had to, reach out to Tablespoon, Sage Intacct for support on the ERP side?
Yeah, yes to both. So obviously in the beginning, we had more support needs, and I mean, I can say that both Factura and Tablespoon were very helpful and very quick to respond. Now we still have some need for help on occasion. So for Factura, occasionally we'll have an EDI file issue or a vendor issue or something. And the feedback I get from my team is every time they reach out, Factura is very quick to respond and resolve the issue. So we're appreciative of that. And, Tablespoon likewise. So, for example, we've had fixed asset questions. And so we'll send those over, and Tablespoon's very quick to respond to those as well. Another thing, Tablespoon is also a great resource for us in, when we're evaluating or considering other softwares that might join well with Intacct. For instance, we're looking at expense reporting. And so one of our first calls was to Tablespoon to make sure whatever we chose, which ones work well, which ones don't. So anyway, yes, both companies have been very supportive.
Obviously, when you're setting up new systems, implementation is really, really important. So first of all, I'm curious, to get your take on just the overall implementation process.
Okay.
Really both, because we ultimately, you had to, of course, implement Sage Intacct and Factura more or less together. I mean, it was part of the same overall project, right? So yeah, love to get your take on just, how did that implementation go? Any particular areas that you felt, worked well, or
Well, really, I feel like it all went very well. I think Tablespoon has their own implementation checklist of all of the things that they're going through. I had my own. I was in constant communication with the Tablespoon team. Making sure that the things that were on my list were also on Tablespoon's list. And then as we brought Factura into the integration discussions, Factura was the same way. During that time, it's a very busy time. There's a lot of communication, lots of meetings, lots of emails, and I mean, I have to say that both Tablespoon and Factura were very patient because we asked a lot of questions and sent a lot of emails. And so yeah, it's a very busy time, and I mean, you just have to be uber focused on every detail. And fortunately, we were successful in implementing both new systems.
well, and we've, through experience, of course, we've learned it strong leadership on the client side is absolutely integral, and that goes a long way towards driving to the success of any implementation. And to that end, of course, obviously there's a lot at stake too, because you were also having to onboard a team.
Right.
And I'm just curious too, from what you recall, how did you think about the kind of the sequencing of that in terms of, bringing in the team, getting the team ready versus when it was time to start working on the actual system itself? Because I do remember a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah. So, obviously there was a lot of pre-work that Tablespoon and Factura and Good Times were all working on together before we brought in the team. I didn't need to bring in the team too early, and it was kind of a guess of where is that sweet spot of when to bring them on, because you don't, when all of the accounting is being done outsourced, you don't really have anything for them to do if you don't have systems stood up and your accounting is being done elsewhere. What's an accounting team to do? So anyway, it was really had to think through each role of, okay, if I bring this person in now, what am I going to have them do? How can they help us with the implementation? And so bringing in an accountant a little bit early, I could utilize that accountant to help us tie out our GL history. And so I just had to think through every single role and the timing of when it would be beneficial and when it would be important to have them join in.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Carrie, and on this webinar, I've heard you say things about, you've got some very interesting processes, very sometimes challenging things like EDI files. I know you have things coming out of C2IT. You've got things coming out of, different vendor portals and platforms, and just regular PDF invoices as well. I've heard about the 95%, efficiency gains. That's amazing. What would you say are your top, things that you love about Factura?
Well, I mean, I'd have to say I love that it works the way it's supposed to. So, I mean, that's really, that's what we need our systems to do, right? We have the conversations, we set them all up. They need to work like they're supposed to work. And I am very happy to say that Factura and Sage Intacct work the way they're supposed to, and they work well together. So that's my favorite, is that they do what they're supposed to.
Gotcha. Well, my follow-up question was going to be on the Intacct side, but I think you've answered that. That everything is just we're meeting your expectations on both fronts.
Absolutely.
From a customer service perspective, we're meeting your expectations there, and so we're just super excited to have you as a customer. And I'm going to speak for Andy as well, as
Absolutely.
he's the same as me.
All right.
So Brad, do you want to share your screen really quick and just give like a quick high level kind of demo of Factura and just how it syncs into Sage Intacct and things, all that good stuff. And then we'll
Sure.
save the last 5 minutes for Q&A.
Sounds good. So let me just bring up Factura. It's going to be a very, very high level demo of Factura itself. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
You're good.
Cool. So Factura integrates with Sage Intacct through their API. It's something called a web service. Once we get access to through the web service, we can pull all the information we need from Sage Intacct, chart of accounts, the vendor lists, terms, things like that. And then we push the information back to Sage Intacct through the API. The bill information, so AP bill information, we can do PO stuff. We also push the image of the invoice into Sage Intacct, and we can also reconcile payments if you use Factura for payments as well. So at a high level, what does Factura do? Factura extracts the data from your invoices the way that you want the data to be extracted. It could be one invoice going to a total GL, like one GL. You could have multiple line items going to multiple GLs. You could have an invoice that needs to get split amongst multiple locations, and obviously credits as well. Those are the 4 scenarios that typically our customers see. And so from a flow perspective, we set up one email address for all of your locations to send their invoices into. If you have an AP inbox, it's easy just to set an auto forward rule. It comes into Factura. We then ingest that invoice, extract the information, know which location it belongs to, all within around 30 seconds. What you're looking at here, these are the AP tasks. These are where the AP employees live in Factura. In the middle is the workflow. So you can have customized, configured workflows based on your policies. In Carrie's case with Good Times, they actually have a vendor type, and that's vendor type set up in Sage Intacct, and that actually dictates where the invoice goes from a department perspective. And then in addition to that, there's GL routing as well. And so, Factura can handle very robust workflows, really based on your policies, and it's visible and transparent for everyone. So from a flow perspective, invoice comes in. As long as there's no error, it'll go out for an approval. And we'll just show you some examples of what an invoice looks like, extracted from Factura. Here's just a Cisco invoice. This is a 5-page Cisco invoice. This one was set up to extract all the lines. Once we have your chart of accounts straight from Sage Intacct. Once you'll see if I start to type it in, it'll pull up the name or number. And once you code it to whatever you want to code it to, it knows next time that when Cisco comes in and it's for this description of eggshell, it's going to get coded to food or produce or whatever you've assigned it to. And it remembers. So you train the system once, and every time going forward, the system's going to know where to code those lines. Same thing at the vendor level if it's just a total invoice going to one GL as well. And for invoices where it's a split, sometimes we see a Loomis bill as an example. They list the 100 locations on the invoice with specific dollar amounts. Factura can extract it that way. Or if it's just a total invoice and you're like, I know I need to split this amongst all of my locations, evenly or by a percentage, Factura can handle that as well. So invoice comes in, goes for all the necessary approvals as need be. And then we'll come back for the accounting department or AP department to do a final review. They go through, here's a Cisco invoice again. They'll go through and just do a quick check. Is the invoice number right? Is the location right? Are the GLs set up, correctly? Am I missing anything? And if everything looks good to them as a final check, they'll click reviewed for export. It'll sit in the ready for export bucket, waiting to be pushed over to Sage Intacct. Now, what else could happen along the way? An invoice could get rejected by an approver. It'll come into the rejected bucket for AP to see with a note. They'll be able to see, oh, this was rejected by this user for such and such reason. They can either deal with the vendor specifically or send it back for an approval, asking that the approver to, figure out or fix whatever the issue is. Errors could be duplicate invoices, just as an example here. We do a side-by-side comparison of the duplicate versus the original, so that sometimes vendors do reuse invoice numbers. And so we just want to make sure that the user sees that and can take the appropriate action. If they delete any invoice within Factura, we keep it forever. We've got an audit trail to keep track of everything in the system itself. And as I said, when you're ready to push it over to Sage Intacct, this is my demo account, but there'll be an upload button. Within a few seconds, you'll have all the right information with the image of the invoice pushed into Sage Intacct, so that if you do actually go into the Intacct, you'll be able to see that image and see that transaction. Factura also can handle payments if need be, and we do actually reconcile to Sage Intacct on the payment side. So, quick high-level demo.
That was great for 5 minutes.
Yeah, some highlight points, just, Factura process invoices in 30 seconds. Our goal is to get you to 90% efficiency. We just make things faster, more transparent, have the right controls in place. Sorry.
Take a sip. We have about 4 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, now is the time. I think you can use the Q&A. Kate may know the.
Yep, the Q&A is available for questions. Don't be shy. We encourage them. I don't see any quite yet.
I
Oh,
see
here's one.
Yeah.
I see one. Here's a great one. Does Factura detect the duplicate invoice, or is that from a rejection on import from Intacct?
It's actually two. So if Factura has a copy of that invoice already in Factura, we will error it out as a duplicate on the ingestion. But for whatever reason, if it made it through that duplicate catch, Intacct also has a duplicate catch. So when we send it off to Intacct and it says, oh, this invoice number already exists, it'll fail. It'll show back up into a section within Factura with the in our audit trail. It'll show you the reason why it failed. And it could be a invoice number exists, that it's the wrong GL account. Sometimes there's restrictions on entity and vendors and locations. It depends on how you set up your Intacct. And so it could fail for various reasons. But to answer your question, there's two gates that it has to go through to make sure that it is a legit and unique invoice number.
I can take the next one. It's how do invoice images post in Sage Intacct? Are they links or attached docs? It's actually the actual image. It's not a link to another system or a link to the image. The actual image will come over and live inside Sage Intacct. And then we have one for Carrie. Carrie, can you be more specific about what made your AP processes more unique that made Factura necessary for your needs?
So yeah, Bradley covered.
You share out like the store count number. That might help too, that Good Times has.
Yeah, we have 68 locations. We have like a couple of different brands as we've discussed. Bradley brought up the workflow. So we have workflow based on the vendor type. That if it is a legal invoice, it routes one way. If it's a construction invoice, it routes another way. We also have some that are specific to, if they are coded to this GL account code, then route it this way. We also have a secondary approval based on dollar amount. So we just had some complexity within the AP approval routing that Bradley and Factura team were able to resolve for us. In addition, we had EDI invoices coming in. And so at the time, Sage Intacct wasn't set up well to handle that. So Factura handled that for us, also produced an image of that for us, which is basically a report of what that EDI file said, so that we have something that we can basically print out as an invoice image. So that's just a, high level of some of our complexities with AP.
Yeah, just
Oh,
just
that's
adding
great.
that,
Thank you.
those some of those were coming from C2 I believe, as an
Well, so
expert.
we have some EDI coming into our back of house system, and then we were pulling data from our back of house system and putting that into our ERP, and now through Factura first. And then we also had some direct EDI into ERP, and that's now going into Factura as well. So
Yeah.
we had data flowing from all different directions.
In addition to just regular invoices that
In
come.
addition to regular invoicing. And then the other thing that you guys worked out for us was we needed the ability, in legacy system, we were able to upload. So basically put data from an invoice onto a spreadsheet and upload it into the system. And so for a couple of our vendors that you built special processes, kind of a pseudo EDI for us,
Yeah.
that works for that. We have a template that we populate, and Factura then reads it and flows it through.
Yeah, and that's an Excel spreadsheet. So it's just
Yep.
an Excel spreadsheet with invoice, lines, and so we take
Mhm.
that and then create an invoice per line essentially, or per invoice, as if they were individual invoices coming into Factura. So lots of complexities, and we were able
Yep.
to.
Well, I love that. I love those answers. It looks like we don't have any additional questions. Last chance, last call. Oh, wait, there's one more. How well does Factora's OCR engine interpret handwritten or scanned documents? That's a super good question.
So scanned documents is for us is no different than a PDF document. It works just as well. Handwriting, I always say the same thing, which it really depends on the handwriting itself. Now, an invoice that's handwritten doesn't have 100% handwritten. The logo might be, stock. The invoice number might be stamped. The location might be stamped. Maybe the dollar amount is handwritten. Surprisingly, it works a lot better than I thought it actually would work. But really, it comes down to handwriting. Comes down to where they've written on the invoice, with a period or no period. It doesn't pick it up. But at the end of the day, is because there are reviewers in the process. People do notice that and say, oh, this handwritten note, Factura picked up $3,000 because the person forgot to put a period, just the way that they write. And so instead it would be, what is it, $30. And so, the user can then just add the period at the appropriate spot and update that. But it really does come down to the handwriting. Horrible handwriting.
Yeah, the handwriting has to be legible.
Correct. It has to be legible.
And we have another one. What all dimensions from Sage Intacct does Factura integrate with? Like, can we bring in departments, classes, etc.?
Yeah, there's 8 dimensions that I'm aware of in Sage Intacct, and we can handle all of them.
Yeah, I think there's 8 total, right, Andy? Andy would know.
Standard, you can add more custom if you are adventurous, but yes.
So the 8 standard we handle, and then if there's custom fields that are developed, then we can also handle those as well.
Gotcha. Any last stragglers for questions? If not, we will share this with all of you guys. Once it transcribes, we'll share this webinar with you guys. And if anyone wants to learn more, we'll send out our contact info. And it was so great to chat through. Carrie, I just can never say thank you enough. I'm gonna follow this up with another thank you email. So I thank you so much for your time. Andy, as always, thank you so much for your time. Bradley, thank you for dedicating your time in the day to this, and Kate for putting it together. And thank you all so much for joining today. I really appreciate everyone's time in the middle of their workday. So thank you guys. Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.